The snow had been falling for 3 hours, but Lena barely felt the cold anymore. Her knees pressed into the frozen ground, the thin ceremonial dress they had forced her to wear offering no protection against the cutting mountain wind. She kept her gaze lowered, watching tiny flakes melt against her pale skin, because looking up meant facing them. The wolves. The tightening circle of death slowly closing around her. This was the ancient law, the Provalupi, the trial of wolves. When an Omega was rejected by her destined mate during the sacred bonding ceremony, the pack decided whether she deserved to live. Not with words, not with votes, but with teeth and instinct. If the wolves attacked, she died. If they retreated, she lived. But only to be cast out, marked as rejected, abandoned to survive alone in the wilderness. Lena had always known she was different. Weaker than the others, smaller, quieter. Her wolf had never fully awakened, never given her the strength even the lowest Omega should have. So when Marcus, the beta she had been matched with since childhood, stood before the entire Silverpaw pack and spoke the words of rejection, she hadn't been surprised. Destroyed, humiliated, but not surprised. I, Marcus of the Silverpaw pack, reject you, Lena, as my mate. You are not worthy of carrying my bloodline. You are not worthy of this pack. The words echoed in her mind as she knelt in the snow, surrounded by 12 of the pack's most vicious enforcers in their wolf forms. She could hear their breaths, see their eyes glowing in the dim twilight, smell their hunger for violence. Some had hated her for years. Now they had permission to show it. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about the trial of wolves, how it was once meant to be merciful, a swift end for those too weak to survive the pain of rejection. But over the centuries, it had twisted into something else: sport, entertainment. The pack gathered to watch, placing bets on how long the rejected Omega would last, whether she would beg or stay silent, whether the wolves would make it quick or drag it out. Lena chose silence. She wouldn't give them the pleasure of her screams. The largest wolf, a scarred gray brute named Rurik, stepped forward. His lips peeled back from his fangs, a deep growl rising from his chest. The others moved with him, tightening the deadly circle. This was it. Their decision had been made. She was going to die. Lena closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother, the only person who had ever loved her. She had died 2 winters ago, leaving Lena completely alone. Maybe this was better. Maybe death was kinder than living as a rejected Omega, scorned and broken. The growling grew louder. She could feel their presence, so close now that their breath formed small clouds of condensation in the frozen air. She braced herself for the pain, for the feeling of teeth sinking into her flesh. But it didn't come. Instead, the growling stopped. Abruptly. Completely. The silence was so absolute that Lena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She opened her eyes slowly, confusion tightening her chest. The wolves had frozen, not retreated, but halted mid-motion, as if an invisible force had turned them to stone. Their ears were pinned back, their tails low, their bodies trembling not with aggression, but with submission, with fear. Lena felt it then, a presence so powerful the air itself seemed to grow heavy. The temperature dropped sharply, at least another 10 degrees, and the snow began to fall harder, faster, as if the sky was reacting to something unnatural. She turned her head slowly, following the wolf's gaze. He stood at the edge of the clearing, barely visible through the falling snow. Tall, impossibly tall, with silver hair that glowed against the darkness. He wore no coat despite the freezing cold, only dark clothing that looked fit for royalty. But it was his eyes that made Lena's breath hitch. They were not the warm amber of a normal wolf. They were silver, pure, brilliant silver that pierced through the darkness and seemed to see everything. The Alpha King. Lena had never seen him, only heard whispers and legends. The most powerful werewolf in the Northern Territories, a ruler of dozens of packs, a king who could kill with a thought, and whose very presence made alphas bow. He never visited small packs like Silverpaw. There was no reason for him to be here, yet he was, standing in silence, watching her. The wolves surrounding her began to back away, whimpering, their bravado collapsing instantly. Even Rorik, the most vicious of them all, lowered his head and retreated with his tail tucked between his legs. In seconds, the circle shattered, the wolves scattering into the forest and leaving Lena alone on her knees in the snow. The Alpha King moved then. He didn't walk. He glided, silent as death, smooth as a predator. He crossed the clearing until he stood directly in front of her. Up close, he was even more terrifying. His face was sharp and cold, carved from ice and cruelty, and his silver eyes looked down at her with an unreadable expression. Lena tried to lower her gaze in submission as she had been taught, but she couldn't. Something in his eyes held her captive, demanded her attention, refused to let her hide. "Stand," he said. His voice was quiet, barely more than a whisper, yet filled with absolute authority. Lena's body obeyed before her mind could catch up. She rose on shaking legs, her bare feet numb from the cold, her dress soaked through and clinging to her skin. He studied her in silence, his gaze traveling over her face, her body, lingering in places that made her cheeks burn despite the cold. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he could see every secret she had ever kept, every weakness she had ever hidden. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lena," she whispered. Her voice cracked from disuse and cold. "Lena of no. Pack." Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or recognition. She couldn't tell. "Who rejected you?" "Marcus. Beta of the Silverpaw Pack. He had every right to. I am weak. I am not worthy of—" Silence. The command cut through the air like a whip. Lena's mouth snapped shut, her heart pounding. She had said something wrong. She was going to die anyway, just by a king's hand instead of wolves' teeth. But he didn't strike her. Instead, he stepped closer. So close she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the scent of winter pine and something ancient and powerful. Something that made her wolf, her broken, silent wolf, stir for the first time in years. "You are not weak," he said, his voice dropping lower. "You have been suppressed. There is a difference." Lena blinked, confused. I don't understand." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, his hand came to rest against the side of her neck, his fingers cool against her freezing skin. The moment he touched her, something inside Lena's chest exploded. It wasn't pain, it was recognition. A bond snapped into place with such force she gasped, her knees almost buckling. She could feel him. Not just his physical form, but his emotions, his power, his very soul intertwining with hers. The mate bond. But that was impossible. She had been rejected. Her bond with Marcus had been severed. She should never feel this again. Unless Marcus had never been her true mate at all. "No," she breathed, shaking her head. This cannot be real." The Alpha King's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but with no warmth, only dark satisfaction. "You are mine," he said simply. "You have always been mine, and anyone who told you otherwise will answer to me." Before Lena could respond, before she could even process his words, the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow made them both turn. A group of wolves emerged from the forest, shifting into human form as they approached. At the front was Marcus, her former betrothed, his face pale with shock. Beside him stood Alpha Theron of the Silverpaw Pack, an older man with gray threading through his dark hair. Both men dropped to one knee instantly, heads bowed. "Your Majesty," Alpha Theron said, his voice trembling. "We had no idea you would be gracing us with your presence. If we had known—" "If you had known, you would have what?" The king interrupted, his voice still quiet but edged with a violence that made everyone in the clearing flinch. "Hidden your barbaric traditions? Pretended you do not force rejected Omegas to kneel in the snow while your wolves decide whether to tear them apart?" "It is the old law, your Majesty," Theron said carefully. "The Provalupi has been practiced for centuries. We were simply following—" "The old law is abolished," the king said. "As of this moment, any pack that attempts the trial of wolves will be disbanded and their alpha executed. Is that clear?" Silence. Then, quickly, "Yes, your Majesty. Perfectly clear." The king's attention shifted to Marcus, still kneeling with his head bowed. "You rejected her." It wasn't a question, but Marcus answered anyway. "Yes, your Majesty. I had the right to." "You had no right," the king said, his voice dropping into something deadly. "Because she was never yours to reject. She carries the bloodline of the Moon Blessed. She is descended from the first wolves, the ancient ones who walked these lands before packs existed. That is why her wolf has been silent. The power is too great for her to access without proper training, without someone strong enough to guide her through the awakening." Lena's mind spun wildly. Moon blessed? Ancient bloodline? She was nobody. The weakest Omega in the pack. How could any of this be true? "Your Majesty," Alpha Theron said hesitantly, "if I may, the girl's family has been in this pack for generations. Her grandmother never mentioned any—" "Her grandmother was protecting her," the king interrupted. "The Moon-Blessed have been hunted to extinction by those who fear their power. Do you think she would announce it to a pack that would see her granddaughter as a threat?" He paused, his silver eyes returning to Lena. "But she told the girl stories, did she not? Taught her the old language? Gave her a necklace with a moon symbol she was instructed never to remove?" Lena's hand went to her throat. The necklace was still there beneath her soaked dress, the one her grandmother had made her swear to keep hidden. She had never understood why. "How do you know this?" she whispered. The king's expression softened just slightly. "Because I have been searching for you for 5 years. Since the moment I became king and gained access to the old records, the genealogies that track the ancient bloodlines. I knew you existed. I knew you were out here somewhere, hidden and unaware of what you truly are. And when I felt the shift in the bond tonight, when I felt your life in danger, I came." He turned back to Marcus and Alpha Theron, the softness disappearing, replaced by cold fury. "You tried to kill my mate. You put her through a death trial because you were too ignorant to recognize what she is. Give me one reason why I should not burn this entire pack to the ground." The clearing fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the answer. Alpha Theron looked ashen, his hands trembling. Marcus had gone completely pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Mercy, your Majesty," Theron finally managed, his voice cracking. "We did not know. We would never have—" "Ignorance is not innocence," the king said, "but I will offer you a choice. Swear fealty to me directly. Disband the Silverpaw Pack and join the Northern Crown Pack. You will be retrained, re-educated, and anyone who refuses to abandon the old barbaric ways will be exiled. Or refuse, and face execution." The clearing tightened with fear. "We swear fealty," Theron said instantly, dropping to his knees and pressing his forehead to the snow. "The Silverpaw Pack is yours, your Majesty. We are yours." The others, including Marcus, hurried to follow, repeating the oath of fealty. Lena watched in stunned disbelief, unable to grasp how her entire world had been destroyed and rebuilt in mere minutes. The king seemed satisfied. He turned back to Lena, and this time, there was something almost gentle in his eyes. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded, even though her legs felt ready to collapse. "Good. Come with me. You are done with this place." He extended his hand. Lena stared at it, her mind spinning. This was impossible. He was the Alpha King. She was nobody. This had to be some kind of mistake. Some cruel twist that would end with her back in the snow, unwanted and alone. But the bond in her chest pulsed with certainty. And when she met his silver gaze, she saw no deception, only conviction. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and the bond flared brilliantly. He drew her close, wrapping a heavy coat around her shoulders. She hadn't seen him wearing it a moment ago. He must have summoned it. It was warm, comforting, and it smelled like him. Pine, snow, and something wild and ancient. "What is your name?" she asked quietly as he led her away from the clearing, away from the pack that had tried to kill her. "I know you're the Alpha King, but what is your name?" He looked down at her, and for the first time she saw a real smile. It softened him, made him look less like an untouchable force of nature and more like a man. A dangerously handsome one, but still a man. "Kyle," he said. "My name is Kyle, and you, Lena of the Moon Blessed, are going to be my queen." The journey to Kale's territory took 3 days by car, winding through mountain passes and dense forests, until they reached the heart of the Northern Crown Pack lands. Lena had never been this far from Silverpaw territory, never seen anything beyond the small valley where she had spent her entire life. The world was far bigger than she had imagined, and with every mile, she felt smaller. Kyle spoke little during the journey. He sat beside her in the back of the sleek black vehicle, his attention mostly on the documents and reports his advisors brought at every stop. Yet his hand never left hers. Even while reading or speaking to others, his fingers remained intertwined with hers, a constant reminder of the bond between them. Lena spent most of the journey staring out the window, trying to process everything. According to Kyle, she was descended from the Moon Blessed, an ancient bloodline of wolves with extraordinary power. Her grandmother had hidden her to protect her from those who would hunt her, and Kyle, by some miracle or fate, had found her just in time. But why had her grandmother never told her? Why had she allowed Lena to grow up believing she was broken and weak? The question circled endlessly in her mind, unanswered and unanswerable now that her grandmother was gone. When they finally arrived at the Northern Crown Pack compound, Lena could barely believe what she saw. It was no rustic collection of cabins like Silverpaw territory. It was a fortress carved into the mountainside, with massive stone walls and towers reaching toward the sky. Wolves patrolled the battlements, and she could feel the power radiating from the place, ancient and unbreakable. "This is your home now," Kyle said as they passed through the main gates. "You are safe here. No one will ever hurt you again." He led her through corridors of polished stone, past tapestries depicting great battles and legendary wolves, until they reached a suite of rooms larger than the entire house she had shared with her grandmother. The bedroom alone was enormous, with a 4-poster bed piled high with furs and a fireplace already crackling with warmth. "Rest," Kyle said, releasing her hand for the first time since they left the clearing. "You have been through an ordeal. My healer will check on you, and tomorrow we will begin your training." "Training?" Lena asked. "To awaken your wolf," he explained, "to teach you how to access the power that has been dormant inside you all your life. It will not be easy, but I will be with you every step of the way." He turned to leave, but Lena found herself reaching out, catching his sleeve. He stopped, looking back at her with those penetrating silver eyes. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you search for me? Why do you care about a bloodline that was hunted to extinction? What do you want from me?" For a long moment, Kyle said nothing. Then he stepped closer, lifting his hand to cup her face with a gentleness that did not match the fearsome reputation he carried. I want nothing from you except what you freely choose to give, he said quietly. But I will tell you this, Lena. The moment I read your name in those ancient records, when I confirmed you were real, my wolf knew we were meant to find each other. And when I felt you in danger tonight, when I felt your despair and resignation through a bond that hadn't even fully formed yet, I would have torn through armies to reach you. So do not ask me why I care. The answer is simple. You are mine, and I protect what is mine. His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Then he stepped back, his expression shifting back to its usual controlled calm. Sleep, Lena. Tomorrow your real life begins. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Lena stood alone in the enormous room, struggling to grasp the reality that she was no longer a rejected Omega waiting to die in the snow. She was the mate of the Alpha King, descendant of an ancient bloodline and apparently destined for something far greater than she had ever hoped for. She sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. As she lay back against the soft furs, she could still feel Kyle's presence through the bond, a steady warmth in her chest that chased away the remnants of cold. For the first time in years, Lena felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The training began the next morning, just after dawn. Kyle came to her rooms himself, dressed in simple dark clothing made for movement. He led her through the fortress and into a private clearing surrounded by towering pines, the ground still draped in morning mist. The reason your wolf has been silent is because the moon-blessed power is too intense for an untrained Omega to handle, Kyle explained as they stepped into the center of the clearing. Your body has been suppressing it instinctively to keep you from burning out. But that suppression has made you appear weak, when in truth, you are anything but. How do we fix it? Lena asked. We don't fix it. We teach you to control it. He moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. Close your eyes. Feel the bond between us. Use it as your anchor. Lena obeyed, closing her eyes and turning inward. The bond was easy to find, a warm, golden thread stretching from her chest to his. The moment she focused on it, the bond flared brighter, and she felt Kyle's presence more clearly than ever. His strength, his confidence, his unwavering certainty that she could do this. Now reach deeper, he instructed, his voice low and steady, past the bond, down into the place where your wolf sleeps. She is there, Lena. She has always been there. You just need to wake her. Lena had tried this before, hundreds of times, always with the same result. Nothing. Just silence where her wolf should have been. But this time, with Kyle's hands steady on her shoulders and the bond humming warm and alive between them, something shifted. A flicker. A spark. A presence she had never felt before. I feel something, she whispered. Good. Don't force it. Just let her know you're ready. Let her know she's safe. Lena focused on that flicker, on the small, fragile spark that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. She reached toward it gently, offering welcome instead of desperation, acceptance instead of fear. And slowly, so slowly, it began to grow. The sensation hit her like a tidal wave. Power surged through her, ancient and raw, so intense she gasped as her eyes flew open. Her skin shimmered with a soft silver glow, and she felt her bones shift, muscles tighten, senses sharpen to an impossible level. That's it, Kyle said, satisfaction threading through his voice. Don't fight it. Let it flow. But the power was too much, too wild. Like trying to hold back a storm with bare hands. Kyle, she gasped. I can't. It's too much. His arms wrapped around her instantly, pulling her back against his chest. Yes, you can, he murmured. You are moon-blessed, Lena. This power is your birthright. Breathe. Focus on my voice. Focus on the bond. Use me as your anchor. She clung to the bond like a lifeline, letting the overflowing power flow through it, into him, back to her, creating a steady, balanced circuit. The panic eased. The pressure steadied. The power didn't lessen, but it no longer felt threatening. It felt hers. Better? Kyle asked. Lena nodded, breathless. She could feel her wolf now, fully awake, fully aware, for the first time in her life. And it was glorious. It was terrifying. It was everything she hadn't known she needed. They trained for hours. Kyle taught her how to call her power in controlled bursts, how to partially shift without losing herself to the wolf, how to sense nearby wolves and read their intentions with frightening accuracy. By the time the sun climbed high overhead, Lena was exhausted, but exhilarated. She had done it. She had awakened her wolf. You're a natural, Kyle said as they walked back toward the fortress. In a few months, you'll be stronger than most alphas. In a year, there will be few who could challenge you. I still can't believe this is real, Lena admitted. A week ago, I was preparing to die. Now you are mine, Kyle finished, stopping in his tracks to face her. You are mine, Lena, and I am yours. The bond goes both ways. Whatever you need, whatever you want, you have only to ask. Lena looked up at him. This powerful king who had crossed mountains to save her, who had shattered ancient laws to protect her, who had spent the entire morning teaching her, patiently and without judgment, how to control powers she hadn't even known she possessed. The bond between them pulsed with warmth and certainty. Yet 1,000 questions still lingered in her heart. What do you want, Kyle? She finally asked. You said you want nothing from me except what I freely give. But what do you want? He didn't answer immediately. His silver eyes searched hers, quiet and intent. Then he reached forward and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Such a soft gesture for a man known across the territories as a ruthless king. I want you to be happy, he said simply. I want you to feel safe. I want you to grow into your power and become the queen you were meant to be. And someday, when you're ready, I want you to choose me, not because of the bond, because you want to. The sincerity in his voice made Lena's chest tighten. She had expected a king to be demanding, possessive, controlling. But Kyle was giving her a choice, giving her time, giving her space to decide her own future. I think, she whispered, I might already be choosing you. His eyes flashed silver, bright, fierce, unrestrained, and then he was kissing her, not gently, not cautiously, but with a passion that stole her breath and made her knees weaken. Lena kissed him back just as fiercely, pouring all her confusion, gratitude, and steadily growing affection into the moment. The bond between them roared to life, blazing with heat and certainty. When they finally pulled apart, both gasping for breath, Kyle pressed his forehead to hers. You, he whispered, are going to be magnificent. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget it. 6 months slipped by like a dream. Lena trained every day, growing stronger, more confident, more in command of the power that surged within her. Her wolf, once silent and unreachable, was now ever present, fierce and protective. Her bond with Kyle deepened, no longer just a mystical connection, but something built with intention. Trust, laughter, shared battles, quiet nights, and choices made freely. Choices made together. The official mating ceremony took place on the winter solstice, beneath a full moon that seemed to shine brighter than it ever had. Wolves from every pack in the northern territories gathered to witness the union of their king and his moon-blessed queen. Lena wore a dress of silver and white, her grandmother's necklace shining at her throat. When Kyle placed his mark on her neck, claiming her before the entire assembly, she felt nothing but joy. The old laws were gone, replaced by new ones that protected Omegas and punished those who abused them. The Silverpaw Pack, now integrated into the Northern Crown Pack, had adapted swiftly under Kyle's rule. Even Marcus, her former betrothed, had publicly apologized for his rejection, though Lena barely remembered his name anymore. He was a relic of a past that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. On the night of the ceremony, as she stood on the balcony of their private chambers overlooking the snow-covered mountains, Kyle came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly, "leaving your old life behind?" Lena turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had saved her, trained her, loved her, and believed in her when no one else would. "I regret nothing," she said firmly. "That girl who knelt in the snow waiting to die is gone. I am someone new now, stronger, someone who knows her worth." She reached up, cupping his face. "And I have you to thank for that." Kyle smiled, that rare, genuine smile he reserved only for her. "You always had that strength, Lena. I just helped you find it." "Then thank you," she whispered, "for finding me." He kissed her then, soft, sweet, and full of promise. As the moon shone down on them, blessing their union, Lena knew she had finally found where she belonged. Not as a rejected Omega, not as a victim, but as a queen, a moon blessed, someone who had survived the trial by wolves and emerged stronger than ever. She was no longer the girl who knelt in the snow. She was the woman who stood beside a king. Together, they would build a kingdom where no Omega would ever have to face a circle of wolves alone again.